The topic for today we chose is to begin the New Year programs is the Hacking Happiness, Peace and Aging with Grace. So here is a wonderful background for your information about Dr. Brian. He is a medical doctor, also has his MPH, and he received his degree into public health from Tulane University. He's also a board certified family physician. Apart from his own practice, after 9/11, he served as a physician in the California state in the prison systems, also into the Veterans Administration. He also retired from the US Army Reserve as a colonel after 38 years of commissioned service. As a graduate of the US Army War College with a Master of Strategic Studies, he is a veteran of 5 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and spent 8 years in hospital commands. He is the author or co-author of 4 peer-reviewed published studies about the application of the transcendental meditation technique for the promotion of soldier resilience and resolution of PTSD, and is the author of 4 books. Dr. Rees currently serves as consultant for certified teacher of Transcendental Meditation, also for the Operation Warrior Wellness of the David Lynch Foundation, and is also executive director of the Transcendental Meditation for Veterans, enhancing the availability of the Transcendental Meditation program for veterans, service personnel, and first responders. Dr. Rees resides in San Luis Obispo in California with his wife and a dog, and intermittently with one or both of their adult offspring. So that's a little brief about our guest, Dr. Brian. Welcome to the Crack the Wellness Code. These are his books: Heal Yourself, Heal Your World, Detained, Terrorism, Retaliation, and Victory. So as you see, Dr. Brian has an extensive background into very specialized field of PTSD. And I believe it's more relevant because the war with Corona is equally strong and difficult, and this wellness platform really served us well during these challenging times. And here, this wonderful idea of how to weave this PTSD and how it impacts us, and how the transcendental meditation practices and certain new ideas which can actually enhance our life and improve the quality of life and create the bliss and contentment, invincibility for everyone in the world, for the global peace. So welcome, Dr. Brian, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. This is our topic, and that's my pedigree at the bottom. And let's see if I can, okay. So as far as I know, I'm not getting paid anything, so I'm an honest broker here. And these will be our learning objectives. You can read them, but I'll just mention post-traumatic growth may be a new concept to some. We'll introduce that, look briefly at transcendental meditation for post-traumatic stress, and then look at 3 possible mechanisms of action for the effects that TM seems to have on post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic growth. And then, of course, for those of us who are not traumatized, that may all seem somewhat irrelevant. So I hope I'll be able to pull through the thread of some commonalities which are applicable to those of us who have not been traumatized. So the term post-traumatic growth is not that new. It was first published back in 1996. Rich Tedeschi was a graduate student and was told by his mentor that he needed to go sit in on some groups with bereaved parents, which he was very reluctant to do, thought he had nothing to offer and that it would be miserable and depressing. But he found that in sitting in with them, there was a theme. There was a population of people who were just doing miserably, of course. And then there was a population of parents who despite the loss of their child, had somehow transmuted that loss into something positive. And so he found that very interesting. By something positive, I mean, even though the parent, of course, would have moved heaven and earth to have their child return to them, that was not an option. But they would, for instance, there's one family, their son loved playing baseball. And so they founded a nonprofit and started buying property and setting up baseball fields all around inner cities where kids who otherwise would not be able to play baseball could. So those sorts of things he wanted to study. And he looked around for other information about post-traumatic growth and fell upon the experience of the men returning from the Hanoi Hilton. That was the prison in which American aviators who had been shot down and bailed out over North Vietnam were incarcerated. And there were 591 of them who were in prison there for from 2.5 months to 8.5 years. And when they were about to return home, the doctors and specialists told their families that they could expect that their returning husbands and fathers would be psychotic and infertile, and basically their life as they had known it was over. Now, as it turns out, the rate of post-traumatic stress among veterans returning from Vietnam was about 30%, just regular ground pounders who were in the field. And the expectation was that the rate of that diagnosis among these men would be, in the high 90s. It turned out that the rate was 4%. And this was a mystery, but they studied these men, and they've been studied annually, those who still survive, ever since then. And they, by reconstructing their experience, both while they were imprisoned and after they returned home, they were able to identify these 5 domains of post-traumatic growth. The first here you see personal strength, and that's just the idea that if I've lost my child, if I've been in prison for 7 years and been tortured and starved and so forth, then I really have taken the worst that life can throw at me, and I'm strong enough to deal with anything else that I might encounter. They found that their relationships were improved, they had a much greater capacity for intimate relationships, and had founded relationships that persisted for decades with those with whom they were in prison. And they encountered and experienced and addressed spiritual and existential questions that many people who are not traumatized often just float through life without ever really having to question the purpose of their existence or the reason why bad things happen to good people and so forth. They didn't have this option. Well, they had the option, and if those answers were not forthcoming, then unfortunately we do see the results of post-traumatic stress, which can lead to depression and suicide and so forth. But if they are able to address these issues adequately, then there is this opportunity for growth. And then the other is appreciation for life, simple things, and recognizing that the possibilities in life can be unlimited. Now, I mentioned all these things. Of course, post-traumatic growth is not the only kind of growth. We don't have to be traumatized in order to grow. None of us decides to send our children to the worst school in the lousiest neighborhood so they can be traumatized and then grow from it. That would be a stupid idea. So it certainly is not the only kind of growth. And indeed, part of my theme for this talk is that the lessons from post-traumatic growth can be generalized to those of us who have not been traumatized. Further, they were able to deconstruct and reconstruct phases in the path of post-traumatic growth. Now, path is not misspelled there. That's actually a program which has been developed. It is the Warrior Progressive and Alternative Training for Healing Heroes, which is, you can Google it. It's online. They've got a website. It's a great program. I've taught there a number of times, and they have identified these 5 phases which tend to facilitate post-traumatic growth. Time constrains me from going into any of them in detail, except that second one, which I have emboldened and underlined, which is regulation, which is where meditation practices, and specifically we'll be talking about TM, where that fits into this model. Once again, I'll reiterate that you can have growth without trauma, and you can have post-traumatic growth without TM. That is just the nature of being human. We can grow from trauma. But what we try to do in this program in the Warrior Path is stack the deck and try to make it as easy as possible to succeed in post-traumatic growth. So let's move on to the second point, which is just a brief overview of TM, Transcendental Meditation for post-traumatic stress, and why particularly TM, aside from my bias. Hopefully I have some data to support that. There are a number of different meditative techniques. As far as I know, this is not one of them. Let's move on to, let me digress for just a moment and talk about Mama Tiger here. So the story may be apocryphal, but apparently this tiger, she had a couple of cubs that did not survive. And she became depressed. She wasn't eating, and the zookeeper thought that she would die. So they had the brilliant idea of taking these suckling pigs and wrapping them up in tiger outfits and putting them in the enclosure with her. What could go wrong? They figured either she would adopt them and rekindle her maternal feelings. Worst case scenario was she got her appetite back. So we'll come back to Mama Tiger in just a couple of minutes. So again, there are lots of different meditative techniques. They can be lumped and split in various ways. One that has been published back in 2010, there we go. Lumped 3 broad categories: focused attention, open monitoring, and automatic self-transcending. And these different techniques, different categories of techniques can be differentiated one from the other, electroencephalography, also through functional MRI and PET scanning. So the purpose of all this is not to appreciate why part of your brain turns orange and another part turns blue, but just to recognize that different meditative techniques do different things. They are different one from the other. So the question is, so what? Do those differences are they significant? Do we need to recognize those in order to make decisions about them? And for instance, we can see here that even though these little piglets are never going to chase down a gazelle, of course, neither is Mama Tiger since she's in a zoo, but these piglets will never be tigers, but they're close enough for government work as far as Mama Tiger is concerned. So they fit the bill, even though clearly they're not tigers. But you could envision a scenario where when something is not the same as something else and you're looking for a particular outcome, that it may be that the outcome you're looking for, even though it seemed like you were headed in the right direction, you're not going to get what you want. So the purpose of that is just to recognize again that different meditative techniques are different. And the one that we have fallen upon for our talk this evening is TM. It's been around since antiquity, but it was introduced to the West in the late 1950s by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi. It entered its pop phase in the 60s with the Beatles and Mia Farrow and so forth, if you're old enough to remember them. And then it went into its scientific phase starting in about 1970, and there it has remained. So there have been many millions of dollars spent, over 400 peer-reviewed studies, and I'm blessedly not going to go into many of them tonight. For those of you who are completely unacquainted with it, let me just mention that it is a mental technique, 20 minutes twice a day, The results are prompt. It's easy to learn, effortless to perform. It's not a religion. It's not a philosophy. It's compatible with any. And it doesn't require any change in belief or lifestyle, with the exception that it does require you to actually practice the technique in order to get the results. So with that exception, no other changes in lifestyle are required. So it has the effect of busting stress. So we see here it has beneficial effects with regard to anxiety, in the reduction of high blood pressure. This statement from the American Heart Association indicated that TM could be considered in clinical practice to lower blood pressure, but all other meditative techniques, they said, were not recommended in clinical practice to lower blood pressure at this time. That may change, but at the time they wrote this in 2013, and they have not updated that since. So that's the current recommendation. There is one study that I do want to mention, not because it's so relevant necessarily to our topic, except that it points out a significant distinction with regard to the research on TM. Most of the research, even though it uses standardized tools and is published in peer-reviewed journals and so forth, it's still, the tools measure a subjective experience. They measure people's self-reported sleep, with the exception of the basic science studies that look at physiology and hormones and blood pressure and things like that. When it's measuring, or rather studying how people feel, you have to ask them how they feel, whether with regard to their anxiety, their sleep, their relationships, and so forth. This study, by contrast, looked at persons with coronary artery disease and randomized them to TM versus a control group, which controlled for attention and time and so forth. And their endpoints were not, how you're feeling, how you're sleeping, whether you're stressed or not. Their endpoints, the endpoint was a composite index of heart attack, stroke, and death. So certainly you're going to feel bad if you had a heart attack or a stroke, but the point is that this is not a fuzzy endpoint depending on how you feel at all. Their index was not how you feel about having a heart attack, it was whether or not you had a heart attack or a stroke or you died. And as you can see, the result there, 48% fewer events over a little less than 5.5 years. And that was intent to treat data, which just means that that was all comers. If you were randomized to the TM group and then decided that you didn't want to do it at all, or you did it for a week and they decided to quit, your data ended up in the TM group. The 62% is for completers, those who actually learned TM and continued to practice it. They had a 62% reduction in this index. So my point there is just that it is not only doing something to your mind and soul, or however you want to look at it, and your psyche, and it's causing improved psychological outcomes, but it's doing something very profound to the physiology as well. So and at tm.org, there's more information that you can find and drill down those rabbit holes to your heart's content. But let's talk a bit about post-traumatic stress. There are lots of things to be stressed about in theater. This is yours truly with my little buddy on a very hot day in Kandahar. Looks like he has impetigo there, but other than that, he was doing well. So it's either too hot or too cold. There never seemed to be any in between. And the snow knocks down your shower point, so you can't take a shower. There are civilians on the battlefield, which complicate things and can lead to tragic outcomes. Little spiders crawl into your sleeping bag or otherwise disturb the bliss that you're experiencing. And then there's combat. Now, this is a photo of John Pryor. At the time of this picture, he was probably 40 or 42. At that time, he was the youngest chief of trauma surgery in the history, I think, of the University of Pennsylvania. Just sharp as a marble, knew everything, could do everything. We served together at Abu Ghraib. And he was just a great guy, not crazy, wrapped around the axle, career first and always, just a regular family man. And he was killed in action on Christmas Day, 2008 in Mosul. So I mention him just because I do not want him to be forgotten, and also to point out that this degree of trauma, of course, his family there is miserable, and also there are these little epitaphs all over Iraq and Afghanistan. Multiply that, of course, we're talking mostly about what's going on here in the United States, but there are orders of magnitude greater effects in Iraq and Afghanistan in the civilian populations. But these little epitaphs are everywhere. This is just noting those who had been killed in action, and you can multiply that times many for those wounded, and then multiply that by their friends and comrades and their family members and their communities, and you can see that it is a big problem. I'm mentioning again, most of these data are about veterans because they're a ripe population to study. My experience was in dealing with veterans that the majority of them, if not the vast majority, actually had complex post-traumatic stress disorder. That is, that they had, even though they didn't have the diagnosis, they had the life experience, they had it before they ever went in the Army. And often it was part of the reason why they went into the military. So these findings in veterans could just as well be findings in civilians. And of course, there's data about civilians as well, but just this group is much more studied. So I'll give you some data about them. The problem is that our gold standard treatments for post-traumatic stress disorder in the Department of Defense and Veterans Affairs are inadequate. This study published in 2015 found that 2/3 of veterans with the diagnosis who are treated with the gold standard treatments, which are prolonged exposure or cognitive processing therapy, retain their diagnosis after completing treatment. And most of them don't complete treatment. So actually a much higher proportion of veterans retain the diagnosis even though they start in this treatment. And of course, a lot of them never start on these treatments at all. So that led in that same JAMA publication then to conclude that we need new, innovative, and engaging approaches for the treatment of PTSD. And then a year and a half later in JAMA Psychiatry, they indicated that satisfaction appears bleak based on low treatment retention, which again dovetails with the finding that even those who complete treatment don't do well. And so just think of how poorly all those who don't complete treatment do. And we've come as far as we can with the current dominant clinical approaches. So we're left, I'll let you read Macbeth here. I guess murder can leave one stressed as well. And he's asking his physician, what to do. And Shakespeare gives a pretty good description of the effects of traumatic stress, the mind disease, the rooted sorrow, the written troubles of the brain, the stuffed bosom of that perilous stuff which weighs upon the heart. And unfortunately, all too often in our society now, in clinical treatment, we end up telling the patient not much different than what the doctor told Macbeth. You're kind of on your own. So I'm just going to run through this very quickly. There have been lots of studies. I think this does not have actually the largest effect sizes, which were in Congolese refugees in Uganda. But you can see that there are effects both with TM and with mindfulness-based stress reduction. But there had not been, prior to this study, any head-to-head studies comparing different meditative techniques in post-traumatic stress or comparing any meditative technique to gold standards. So this study was published in 2018. Fairly large study, non-inferiority design, which is maybe a little opaque, but not really worth explaining. $2.5 million study, high quality. And they looked at two measures of post-traumatic stress and then one measure of depression. And here's the short answer. TM was significantly non-inferior, which again is a little obscure, but this is what it looks like in graphic form. You can see on the vertical axis, we have within group effect sizes, and TM is the kind of blue bar, prolonged exposure is gold, the health education control is in red, and the effect sizes both with the clinician administered PTSD interview, the PTSD checklist, and the PHQ. And for all of these, the TM had the greater effect than the gold standard treatment of prolonged exposure. This they also looked at well, just the percentage on the vertical axis here, percentage of patients who had clinically meaningful improvement in these measures, and you can see again that TM did well. So how does this happen? How can we hypothesize that sitting quietly with eyes closed for 20 minutes twice a day is going to impact post-traumatic stress or promote post-traumatic growth? Now, three ways. First, deep rest releases stress. And so if you're highly stressed, take deep rest. TM provides a deep state of rest. I didn't go into these basic science details, but after just a few minutes of TM, the oxygen consumption drops to levels deeper than after 4 or 5 hours of deep sleep. So it provides a very deep state of rest. And if you heard a lecture about TM, 50 years ago, that's what you would hear: deep rest releases stress, and that would be the mechanism by which we would think TM is impacting post-traumatic stress, because it's stress. Second is transcendence, which actually is the phenomenon which underlies these mechanisms of action. It is both an underlying phenomenon and a mechanism of action in ways that we'll talk about in just a minute. And then third is enhanced personal relationships, which may seem a little off target, but let's talk about that a little bit. So again, this is kind of the basic stuff. This was published in 1987, but it actually was kind of a review of previous studies from the 70s and early 80s. So it's, again, pretty clear. This is, instead of the fight or flight response, it's called the stay and play response. For what that's worth, it causes a change in the physiology different than that of stress. And these veterans, many of them, let me just go back to that, have, they continue to be stressed and they continue to behave as if they're on the battlefield even decades later. And we can talk about that in the Q&A if you are of interest, but that stress response continues and persists over time. Cortisol, your adrenal cortex, which elaborates stress hormones like norepinephrine and adrenaline, it behaves as if it basically shuts off when you begin TM. And so levels of cortisol and so forth just drop over time. So what is going on in terms of transcending? Why do I say it's both a underlying phenomenon and mechanism of action? So in terms of underlying phenomenon, here is just the shortest idea about TM and transcending. The idea is that we have an active aspect of the mind with which most of us are utterly familiar. We experience it from the time we wake up in the morning and our feet hit the floor all through the day, even if we are introspective or paying attention to our breathing or some other physiological functions or paying attention to our thoughts, we're still attending to things, to something. And typically it's our sensory input. And, it's not that this is bad. If you want to learn how to conjugate French verbs, that's where you got to do it, is in that active part of your mind. So it's great. That's where we live life, and definitely has a role, a huge role in life. That's where life is. But there's also a quiet aspect of our minds, which many of us never experience from the time we wake up to the time we go unconscious. all we have experienced is this active, gotta do this, gotta do that, regret what happened back then, and anxious about what might happen going forward. We are just tripping away at ourselves all the time. But there is this quieter aspect of our mind. It's already there. We don't have to manipulate it, control it, create it. It's there like the screen in a movie theater. You go into the movie theater to watch a movie and you watch the whole movie, and there's horses and submarines or whatever, spaceships, and all that while there is this quiet blank screen that's behind all these images that we just never pay any attention to because we're enthralled by the images. But if we take the right angle and use the proper technique, we can transcend, go beyond that great big bubble that was at the top, which is the conscious thinking level, experience subtler levels of thought, and experience this field of pure consciousness, inner wakefulness, transcendental consciousness, pure being, the source of thought. It has many descriptors, but it is an experience without content. There is no subject and object, and we're not thinking about anything in this field. So it can be understood as the field also of yoga, of union with one's inner self, and can be interpreted as the least excited state of consciousness, pure consciousness. And I say that this is both underlying phenomenon and mechanism of action, and it's described in the Bhagavad Gita in just a few verses. Just the whole cream of all Vedic literature, I think, is just in this part, this tiny part of one chapter of one small piece of the Vedic literature. Just has such just immeasurable jewels in it. But of course, Krishna is talking with Arjuna. Arjuna is distressed. He is the greatest warrior of his time. He is there to do battle against the evildoers, and his mind tells him that he has to do his duty. But he looks across the battlefield and he sees relatives and loved ones, cousins, and so forth. And his heart tells him that it would be a sin. And he's looking for resolution. He's looking for answers in the field where there are not answers. And in the 45th verse of the second chapter, Krishna tells Arjuna, Yishtra Bhava, Arjuna, be without the three gunas, be without the field of activity, transcend. And then 3 verses later, he tells him, Yogastha Kuru Karmani, established in yoga, perform action. That first transcend, get established in that field, and then with the benefit of that experience, then perform action. Now, established in yoga sounds like a tall order. That sounds like enlightenment, which may take a minute or two to get there. But previously, Krishna had already laid the groundwork for that in the 40th verse, when he pointed out that a little of this dharma delivers from great fear. And so, the experience, particularly in teaching these veterans, some of whom have been just chronically distressed for decades, and then as they have been living in a very dark place, and often just in the first few days, sometimes even in the first few minutes, the very first session of this meditative practice, as if someone had lit a match in that dark cave. Now, it doesn't get them out of the cave, it doesn't completely illuminate the cave, but they were in complete darkness. They were lost in this experience. And now just a little bit of light lights up this cave and shows them that there is, there are limits to it. There is possibly a way forward. And so some of them, even though they have tons of issues still to deal with, there's a shift in their perspective, which can be remarkable and rewarding. So let's move on now. Of course, we've talked a lot about post-traumatic stress and post-traumatic growth, but I hope I laid the groundwork with the idea that it is not just for the traumatized, that TM has its benefit, and it's not just post-traumatic growth that is available to us. Those of us who have not been traumatized, I think, can learn the lessons of post-traumatic growth and employ them in our lives as well. So let's look at what those might be. So back in 1938, the Harvard Study of Adult Development was started. They started with 268, of course, white men, wealthy, Boston elites. So not the most diverse study to start with. That included John Kennedy, by the way, just as the luck of the draw. And so they recognized that eventually they recognized that they needed to expand their study, and they did. In 1970, they added a whole bunch of others. And they have studied these men. It wasn't just a one-time study. They studied and then followed them for decades, for their entire lives, through wars and marriages and divorces and having children and becoming chronically ill and dying and everything that life can experience. And among the questions they asked was, what gives rise to a good life, to satisfaction in life? Was it, these 268 guys who were in the elite? Was it their social class and wealth? Was it fame? Was it genetics? What was it? And the answer was, it was close relationships. So close relationships were better predictors of a long, happy life than these other issues. And this is consistent with the insights expressed in the book, Man's Search for Meaning. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, he was able to ennoble his own suffering and found something universal in that. He found that being of service to something other than himself, or someone other than himself, gives meaning to life. And we see this recapitulated again and again in those who experience post-traumatic growth, both as a means to promote post-traumatic growth and as a result of post-traumatic growth, that they find their way to service and more meaningful relationships. And then TM, I think, enhances both of those two prior points. There's lots of data that I'm not going to go into here about improving interpersonal relationships in the workplace and family life and student behavior and so forth. And it's also associated with more post-conventional thinking or moral maturity. So the bottom line is, I think these lessons are valuable for those of us. We don't have to go through terrible experiences and trauma in order to get the benefits of the experiences of those who have been through those experiences. So the summary then, to promote happiness and peace and aging with grace, first is find ways to be of service and treasure rather than trash your relationships. And if those two things are difficult to do, they don't seem to happen spontaneously, then transcending can help. There are data that support that you will tend to become more morally mature, more inclined to be of service and have improved relationships if you practice that transcending on a regular basis. So here are some other sites which I think you can research at your leisure. And I think we now have time for questions. So I am going to stop sharing. And Sachin, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much. That was quite profound and comprehensive. So we will head back to the questions after we talk to the three panelists. There are already questions pouring in. Okay, so here are our next panelists. So the first one is Mohana More, and she is a NLP practitioner coach, and she provides diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace programs. And as you see, she has a variety of different qualifications into the life skills and coaching. So I will let her share her expertise, and then it's all you. Back to you, Mohana.
Good evening, everyone. And that's a hard act to follow after Dr. Rees's amazing explanation of his journey and everything that he shared with us. But, I would just like to share that I think all of us, especially with CWC, are just involved in the well-being, increasing the well-being, mental, emotional, and social well-being of people, and really raising the consciousness here of the world, one person at a time. And that's where I am hoping to contribute through CWC as well in my own little way. I'm a core energy coach, as you already know. Core energy coaching really means it's a mixture of Eastern and Western philosophies, and it is really the intent is to really increase increase the well-being, the mental, emotional, and social well-being of people, which is obviously not age specific. And this particular presentation, I call it Unfolding Your Dynamic Aging Personality, because I don't, our elderly, our parents have sacrificed so much and have had such a journey, and they're still doing so much for us and our kids. They continue to do so much. But I feel that a lot of the challenges that we face, that our parents face, and that, as you get older, are somehow not addressed. So this is a little personal for me, because my mother, after she turned 60, being a working professional, when she gave up her professional profession to her career to be with her grandchildren, I know firsthand, the kind of changes that she went through, the loss of control that she faced, the changes in family dynamics, and just the feeling of being stuck and figuring out what to do next, and who am I really, and redefining her as she grew older. And so those are, I think, universal challenges that all our elderlies face. And that's where coaching really comes in, wherein, we try and see the opportunities in challenges. So really, how do we get to a point where we don't feel victimized by the situations and the experiences that we are having or we will have, but how do we actually change our approach? How do we get to a point where we are more in control of what we want out of each and everything that we experience and that we face? And that essentially is coaching. If I want to give an example, probably not the best, but the easiest way to say it is how different it is from counseling. And both, of course, have very important roles to play. But counseling deals with the past and coaching deals with the present and the future. So it really talks about where you are right now and what you want to do. How do you want to shape your life, your situations? How do you want to let go of your inner critic or the assumptions that you make or the limiting beliefs that you have? And so that, in a nutshell, is really what I do. And this is my way of giving back. This is my way of appreciating everything that our elders have done for us. And I'm so thankful for this opportunity to be on this panel and contribute in my little way to, really celebrate what changes you go through. And I'm hoping to meet all of you and work with you to get on top of the changes that you face. So you can find me on the marketplace at CWC website, I guess. And yeah, that's about it. That's for me. Thank you.
So that's a wonderful. I like your statement that the counseling is for the past and the coaching is for the present and for the future. Quite a good revelation to many.
Thank you.
All right. So we will invite our next panelist, Mahesh and Kamal. So Mahesh, And Kamal, everybody has so much background, so I just want to keep the slide handy to read their backgrounds. So I know Mahesh and Kamal for many years, and they are doing some wonderful work before and even now with this Priya Living. So Mahesh has 45 years experience in marketing, business development, senior management, and across 4 continents, Asia, Africa, Americas, and Europe. He's very passionate social worker, as we all know, hospitable, and he also is deeply caring for everyone, not just seniors. So he is very active in education, civic, cultural, and social organizations, and always striving to contribute his best to the community development and service, to bridge the cultural gaps and to work with the city ordinances, governances, formulate plans which will impact the local communities and seniors. Now, since 2015, working as Community and Operations Director of Priya Living LLC, bringing happiness and fun in the life of seniors. He sent me a wonderful small presentation, which I will share after the introduction. And Kamal is his better half, our partner, our companion. And with more than 40 years of experience in the hospitality and high-end retail industry, she acquired her certification in yoga in 2017. And then she is teaching senior yoga into the Priya Living, where they are resident. She also teaches meditation, and she started practicing at a very young age. She is also recently accredited as a laughter yoga teacher by Dr. Madan Kataria, who is the founder of Laughter Yoga Movement. And with her happy and fun-loving personality, she joins her husband Mahesh in bringing happiness in the lives of all seniors. So welcome, Mahesh and Kamal.
Good evening, everybody. It's such a pleasure to be on the CWC platform. Thanks to Som and Dr. Sachin. And Priya Living is a senior living facility which was started, with a vision to bring happiness into the lives of seniors and actually have the seniors living their life. So it's all kinds of things that make this fun living happen. You eat well, you sleep well, you play well, and you have people around you all the time. So the one thing that we discovered at the beginning was that if you take loneliness out of the life of seniors, 70% of the issues concerning everything gets sorted out and solved. And happiness comes into their life automatically. Having people around you of your own age, having the food that you like to eat, having all kinds of energizing programs which are therapeutic and fun, makes living and life much better for seniors. And I think that's a very important thing in today's world, because a lot of us are getting there to become seniors. We also discovered that having youngsters live with seniors creates a fun balance in the whole environment, in the sense the seniors look at youngsters as their children and their grandchildren, and opposite, the grandchildren and the young children look at seniors as their own grandparents who are not here. So basically, our larger facilities going forward will be like a village in India, where we have kids, parents, but with a special place for seniors. So Priya Living Vision was started by Arun Paul, a young person from here, who saw his parents come into into America. It was a very strange place, different custom, different food, different environment, everything. Yet they brought their culture with them. And then they still want to retain their culture and share it with everybody around. So Priya Living is basically, like I said, a multi-generational, multicultural living facility, fun living facility, where the fun of life never ends for everybody, but mostly with a special place for seniors. And as we speak, we have 3 facilities in the Bay Area, one in Los Angeles, which is just starting. And we are starting construction on 3 properties in Texas, Houston, and Dallas, and one in Rochester Hills in Detroit, Michigan, and then 60 other cities, metro cities around USA. because we have realized over time that there is so much need to get this happiness into the lives of seniors. And my better half, Kamal here, joins me and makes this thing happen. I can talk and show you a lot of slides and visuals and everything, but my thing is you are most welcome to come and visit us in Priya Living and come and see for yourself and experience how this fun happens. And I think if we can do that and create happiness in the lives of seniors, it's a great service that we will do to mankind and going forward to our seniors, because we all are getting there too. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. And before we get off this, Kamal and I have just one line of happiness to sing for you.
So I would like to share something. I have noticed that dementia and Alzheimer's and mental disease is increasing all over the world. So I teach yoga and I feel prevention is better than cure. So when I teach laughter yoga activates all the happy chemicals in your body, the serotonin, oxytocin. So that makes a person feel happier. So the after effects of laughter yoga is you get better sleep, good digestion, a smile on your face, and excessive happiness. So that is my aim and my goal in life, to see that everybody is happy in life, because when you're mentally happy, your mind over body, when you're mentally happy, automatically, physically, you improve, your health improves. So that is our aim in life. And now we would just like to share this little song with you.
One line, actually, it says, "Ae dil hai aasan jeena, zara has ke zara mil ke, ye hai Priya Living meri jaan." So आइए, आपका स्वागत है. All of you are welcome. Come and experience the fun and life of fun of living at Priya Living. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mahesh and Kamal. That was wonderful. I can vouch for what they're saying. I've been there a couple of times. And it's a fun place to go, and, wonderful people and smiles and warmth you can experience from the people's hearts. So thank you, Mahesh and Kamal. So we will invite our third panelist, Rohit Arora. So Rohit, he just started a new venture called as HelloMill. So I will just give you a brief background. He has 15 plus years of product management experience, leading teams in building software, products and businesses for consumers and enterprises. He is an innate talent for product UX, design, marketing, and recruiting. He has previously owned a software services company with multi-million-dollar sales and is a co-owner of Lipstart after school centers in Cupertino. He is currently busy building a software platform for weekly meal planning and ordering that gives families a break from restaurant food and home cooked food. So his concept of HelloMill is to provide a platform for consumers which works like grocery shopping. So the consumers can order entire weeks of meals in one order and receive multiple deliveries of food throughout the week. The food is made fresh on the day of the delivery. On the menu of the platform, there is offering of choice of variety of cuisines and styles from the multiple kitchens to provide the satisfaction to the different palates, a different variety of foods, just like a food court service. All food is non-restaurant and non-home cooked food made in commercial kitchens by local chefs, which are actually hired directly through the HelloMill. So I will hand it over to Rohit and he will explain further things.
Thank you, Sachinji. Thank you for having me, for inviting me here. And I'm actually very thankful to Dr. Brian. I learned something about transcendental meditation. I've heard about it many times before, but this was my first introduction. So I launched HelloMill recently, a month ago. And when Sachinji invited me to be on this panel, I was thinking how the platform contributes to seniors and the well-being. And a conversation I had with my mother before I started Hello Meal came to my mind. She was talking to me, and I was telling her that I'm going to build this platform. And she asked me a few questions that, is this restaurant food? And I said, no. Then she said, is it pre-made, like a frozen food? I said, no. And then she said, okay, so is it made fresh every day? I said, yes. So I realized at that point that there's no service in the market today which is providing food which is made fresh, same day as the food is delivered to the consumer. And so I thought that that's something that we can do, which would be different. And talking to Sachinji, I kind of felt that this is a great value addition to seniors and also to well-being of working professionals like ourselves who are eating out a lot these days. And everyone knows that eating out that much is not good for us. At least that level of awareness is there. So I believe there is something to contribute. But also we are new and I'm here to learn. And this session was very helpful. And I would be very happy to go extra mile to incorporate cuisines and plans that cater better to community of seniors. So I'm open for feedback, and I'm looking forward to some feedback from you if you decide to visit tryhellomeal.com. So that's all from me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rohit. That's quite interesting, and we wish you all the best. I'm sure this is a need of the hour, and it's always the lingering need on the families that the lunch is a very difficult situation for most working families. And if there is access where you can have trustworthy, clean food from the right source, and maybe it's scattered by the help from the experts, maybe heart healthy menu or the senior age and something, I'm sure it will have a good patronage from everyone.
I would be happy to talk and do more.
Thank you. Dr. Bryan, before I go to the question, when you finished the PowerPoint, the last slide really caught my eye. And if you don't mind, I want you to go back and elaborate a little bit on that. I know you switched it off, but I want to bring it back. So will you elaborate a little bit on this concept of Veda in the unified field?
Well, yeah, the idea is, without getting too over my head, not being a physicist, but the idea is that just as all forms and phenomena can be understood to have subtler aspects, and when we deal with them more subtly, we can see that something that is inert, like a book that's sitting here on my desk, there's a certain amount of kinetic or potential energy in it. I can throw it across a room and break a window. But there's also subtler energy if I can set fire to it. And you can see that there's a whole lot of energy that's latent there. And you can take, don't know if they could do it with what's in my book, but if you have uranium and you split it, and you can release great quantities of energy. So subtler and inherent with it, all of matter is greater energy. And we tend to look at things that are out there as being the real world, and our thoughts and dreams and aspirations and so forth are just this kind of illusory thing, which is actually backwards. We only experience the world through our senses and our perceptions. So the only thing we really experience, the only thing that really exists for us is our thoughts and our dreams and our aspirations that we interpret through our senses. So what physics tells us about this book, and if I look closely at the book and get down to the molecules and the paper and the atoms and the subatomic particles, everything in this book is just a happenstance, a possibility that certain subatomic particles are going to be in a certain place at a certain time, and it's mostly just empty space. So the reality of everything that we experience is just is akasha, is Veda, is this emptiness. That is what is really us. And this field, we understand that everything that we perceive arises as fluctuations out of this field. And we can experience that because we are made of that same stuff. Our consciousness, our appreciation of life, the things that we think and feel are made of that same stuff. That's what everything is made of. So it is everywhere and everything. And so Max Planck had this, the guy who the Planck scale is named after. He says there he regards consciousness as primary, matter as derivative of consciousness. And of course, the Veda is full of that. Aham Brahmasmi, I am that, everything. I am that, all this is nothing but that. So that is the nature of that field which underlies everything. And this is a field, as it says in this quote, which I can't remember the book I got it from, self-interacting field without boundaries. And so there is, and it's the home and source of orderliness. So particularly, for instance, just to bring it back to my talk this evening, in teaching these veterans, just having that little glimpse of this, their own inner nature, which is transcendent. It is beyond all of the heretofore irreconcilable conflicts that they've been living with. The things that I saw, the things that I did, the things that were done to me. How can God allow a world where things like that can happen to children? Just all of these awful things that they've experienced. And you can't figure that out on the level of figuring things out. It's just, that's not where the answer lies. The answer is transcendent. It is in experiencing that field which is beyond conflict and beyond all change and forms and phenomena.
Thank you. That's very powerful and very transformative. So thank you for sharing that with us. So now I will heading to the questions. So the question from Mukund Acharya is asking, can you apply these PTG concepts to those recovering from grief and loss? And how would you compare TM with other meditation and mindfulness and stress reduction practices? And above question is in relation to helping with the PTG. That's what he is asking.
So to answer the last part first, I have my, I can tell you what I think, my opinion, but as far as any data, that would be lacking. There's not much research, there's a lot of unpublished data that has derived from this Boulder Crest Foundation, which is the umbrella organization for that Warrior Path. They've had hundreds of veterans go through their program over the last number of years. So they've collected a lot of data, but it's unpublished so far. And it's a multimodal program. I should point out that TM and mindfulness are not mutually exclusive. You can practice TM regularly and then be mindful at other times. You don't mix the techniques, but actually TM has been shown to enhance mindfulness. So what effect that's going to have on post-traumatic growth, that has not been researched except with these unpublished data, and they did not separate out, what was the effect of all of the modalities in that program. So my bias tends to run that, there is certainly a role for being mindful, and that's part of, is to bring it back to TM. For instance, with these veterans with post-traumatic stress, they tend to react. They were trained to react in certain ways. And when people make mistakes, then they can go ballistic. And so that is functional if you're a first sergeant and a private is making a mistake, because that can get people killed. And so you can yell and scream and do your first sergeant thing. But if your 3-year-old draws on the wall with a crayon and you go all first sergeant on him, you're going to have a problem. Your kids are going to be afraid of you, and your wife is going to look at you like you've grown another head and you need to go someplace else. So that veteran then he feels guilty and ashamed for this misbehavior, and he isolates and medicates and does all the things that people do when they've been traumatized. So, being mindful that a 3-year-old drawing on the wall with a crayon is not the same as someone threatening your life, and attending to your breathing and calming oneself is a very functional thing to do. My bias and our experience anecdotally is that being regular with TM tends to minimize that tendency to overreact when faced with those sorts of stimuli.
Now, this question is for Mahesh. So Mahesh, Geeta Sheshadri wants to know, do they provide meals and transportation to seniors living in Priya Living?
For the 3 properties that we have here in the Bay Area and the one in Los Angeles, these are the first properties we started. We have independent senior living, so we are not assisted living. But aside from that, we do have our transport, where pre-pandemic we used to take people out for grocery trips and outward trips for picnics or whatever it is, temple trips and other places, mosques and churches and everything. And also, as far as food is concerned, since everybody has their own fully equipped kitchen, they cook their own food, but we have resources available to them who can come and cook for them. They pay them by the hour, whatever it is. We are also part of the Santa Clara County Senior Nutrition Program along with ICC. So all our seniors also entitled to get food from Millen Restaurant, vegetarian restaurant, on a daily basis, 2 meals per person per day. And we have volunteers, very gracious volunteers, who go and pick up this food and come and deliver it to our seniors. And quite a few of our seniors do take those advantages of that kind of food. Yeah. So that's what it is. But going forward, all our new 60 facilities across USA will have a complete kitchen, dining, and cafeterias, and food and everything will be part of the rental that they will pay. So they don't have to worry about cooking or anything.
Now we are about to our closure time. So we always ask the same question in the end to everyone. What will be one takeaway point you would like to share? So I will ask Mohana first, then Rohit, and then Mahesh and Kamal. And Dr. Brian, you will be the last one to give us something to ponder and transform, so that we don't face PTSD of any kind.
Well, like he said, PTSD doesn't have to be just through war, right? We can experience it anywhere. So I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand. So take away from me, or
yeah, from you. So one thing you want to tell people, which they can apply in their life on just now on daily basis, or something which can transform.
Yeah. So very simplistically put, in terms of coaching, and if I connect the dots between coaching and raising the consciousness of the world one person at a time, it really comes down to our thoughts, feelings, and actions. And what we do with those to choose better, to be more in control of what we want out of each and every situation, directly corresponds to a better well-being of mind and body. And that then in effect, makes the world a better place, because people are happier, and, they just, the sense of well-being is much higher. So really thoughts, feelings, and actions, and what you want your approach to be for every situation that you are faced with.
So one takeaway for me personally was that I'm going to explore transcendental meditation a bit more. And I think if I was to say one thing about food to all our audience, I personally have discovered that the key to health is eating less and thinking less. And I would say cook your own food. And if you can't, then try to procure food that is being made fresh every day through sources. You can, of course, hire somebody to cook for you, or you can use a service like ours.
We can say is that, we are very proud and honored to be part of this Augustine esteemed panel. Dr. Brian Rees, of course, great. Young Mohana and Rohit, wonderful things happening. Let's all get together, do things together collectively to make this a beautiful world, not only for the seniors, but for our future generations. Because, जैसे कहते हैं, जिंदगी एक सफर है सुहाना, यहाँ कल क्या हो किसने जाना. We don't know what's going to happen, who's going to be there tomorrow. So all the best.
I would just like to say that share with seniors to be thankful and grateful to and for everything they have in life, not to think about the past and not to worry about the future, just live in the present, because that will not create any stress in their life and that will make them happy. And when they are happy, then they can make others happy. You have to be happy within yourself to make others happy too. So that way it will become a happy world. That is our vision in life. Thank you.
Thank you, Kamal. So now, Dr. Brian.
I would just point out that my fellow panelists are all manifesting service, whether through food or coaching or promotion of laughter and happy relationships with multi-generational housing. And I would like to thank them and congratulate them for that.
Thank you so much. So I think
you.
the biggest message we got is that the service is supreme, and keep doing the service, think of others. And when we bring smile to others, we automatically smile ourselves. So thank you, everyone.